Hi, my name is Eric Tibbetts. I want to share my testimony. I want to share what God has done for me, and it's a lot. It really is. But about 2 years ago, I went to a men's conference, and the Lord spoke to me about sharing my testimony. But not only my testimony, but help others put their testimony out there as well. And listening to a Zach Williams song called Survivor, the Lord said, that's it right there. It's called Survivor's Talk. But it's just me today. I want to share what God has done for me without, all the feelings that come along with being embarrassed. People looking at you negatively, and it's hard to admit you're wrong. It's hard to admit what you've done, maybe the hurts and pains that you've caused others, and I did. There was a lot of it, and I want to share that. But it's hard, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be obedient to the Lord because I know that this is what He wants me to do. So it all started in September 2003. I was on a house, building a house, and I fell about 14 feet down to the basement. I broke my right leg, broke the tib fib, and when it happened, from about my waist up, I felt this, like a feather, and I just laid on the ground. And I realized that my leg was broken, and I heard the Lord say, "Your walk with me is hurt." And from that point forward, for the next few years, I could look back and see my life progressively getting worse, and my relationship with God, getting further and further away from Him. So I had multiple surgeries. I had they put a rod and 4 screws in my right leg, and it was causing me a lot of pain. As the months and years went by, and I eventually had 2 more surgeries. They tried to take the rod and the screws out. The doctor could not do it, and the whole time I'm getting fed pain pills, opiates, and I became addicted to them. I became a drug addict, and it's hard for me to admit that, but that's not who I am today. And I want to share how I went from being a drug addict to being a man that wants to share that testimony, to put this out here, maybe to encourage some others to put their testimonies out. Maybe we can talk and I'll record it and we'll put it out there. But it got so bad. You take them as prescribed, and then you take 1 extra here, maybe 2 extra here, and you're starting to feel like, a high. You feel good. You feel like you have energy. Feel like, you feel better. And then eventually it got to, taking a lot extra, 10 a day. Then believe it or not, it got up to taking 20 Vicodin in 1 day. And that was every single day. So eventually taking 50 Vicodin per day, every day, for months, years, a couple of years. It eventually turned into taking Oxycontin 80s, and I take 5, 6, 7 of those a day. And my relationship with the Lord, with my family, my wife, my kids, my dad, my mom, it just progressively got worse and worse and worse. And I never thought that I would become a drug addict. I always thought that I'd be preaching from the pulpit, ministering to young people, to married couples, you name it. The Lord told me back in 2002 through Brother Jason Sisko that I was going to have a ministry, and the Lord is going to open up the door for that. I was so far away from that. I am so far away. Um, I tried giving up. I tried giving up, and it was so hard because I'd feel sick. I was going through withdrawals, and it's like the flu, and it was hard. It's hard to do that. As much as I wanted to give it up, the feelings of being sick overwhelmed those things. So I would just go back to it, and I'd give it up and then go back to it, and this kind of just went back and forth for so long, and eventually I found myself in a drug rehab. I went to rehab, I believe like 4 or 5 times. I went to jail twice. The last time I went to jail, I got pulled over, and the reason I got pulled over was because there was parts missing off my car. I was selling the fender. I sold the seats. And so there's this car driving down the road with, no bumper, no front bumper, no back bumper, no fender. And so that's why they pulled me over. And then once they pulled me over, they searched my car and found 5 Vicodin in my car. So I got arrested. They impounded my car. I had $600 in cash on me. They took that. They took everything. And I found myself sitting in a jail. And this is the first time I've ever got in trouble for something like this. And eventually they moved me over to a county jail. And I didn't know how long I was going to be in there. But the Lord, even through all of that, spoke to me. And He said, I'm bringing you to a place that you don't want to be. I'm going to strip you down of everything. No car, no clothes. You can't do your hair. And I'm going to turn you into the man that you need to be. And I told the Lord, I don't want to talk to you. I'm done. I was mad at Him. I was mad at myself. I felt like I was just so far away that there was nothing He could do for me. And that's a lie. Because even in the middle of all that, He still loved me. And He was protecting me from things that I was unaware of. I know that. Looking back, I can see it. If I took 50 Vicodin in one day, how did I not have a drug overdose? I never had one drug overdose. Taking that many pills. That's a miracle. My breathing, everything. I mean, why did my heart not stop? So I know looking back that was the Lord. And you hear about people dying from this. Why didn't I die? Why was I the one? And I know He loves me. And looking back, I'm so grateful to be alive. So grateful to be alive. But in my last jail stay, the jail was overcrowded and so many guys there. There was like 20 or 30 of us in this, kind of huge cell, and I see this guy look at me, and he looks at another guy, and they kind of like shake their head, and I'm like, okay, here I am, about to fight. I don't want to fight, but whatever, I'm in jail, and addiction got me there, so here's the consequences. I got to deal with it. And the guy looked right at me. He goes, what are you doing in here? You need to get right with the Lord, and you need to go back to church. He didn't know me. He knew nothing about me. And the other guy said, I can tell by looking at you that you do not belong here. How do I look different than anybody else being a drug addict? It's because I still had the Holy Ghost in me. There was still something different about me, even though I was doing all this stuff that was wrong. This man knew nothing of me. Didn't go to my church. Didn't know my name. Nothing. And the first 2 weeks I was there in jail, I was mad at God I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want nothing to do with him. And one of the inmates came around and he had books, asking anybody, do you want a book? And of course, you know, I'm like, I had nothing, so I'm like, okay, let's see if there's a book here. Well, inside the box was this Bible. I felt like the Lord said, take it. I didn't want to, but I wanted something to read. So I grabbed it. It's a Spanish Bible. I don't know Spanish. And I'm like, I'm trying to read this and trying to understand. I know scripture, so, you know, I know what it says, but I can't read it. And I'm like, whatever. So I just gave it back. And, you know, the guy said he didn't have any English-speaking Bibles. And to be honest with you, I really didn't care anyway. It's like, whatever. I was just so mad at God. I was mad at myself. I probably the most mad I had ever been in my entire life. A couple minutes later go by. The guy comes back. He goes, hey, I've got this Bible. You want it? And it's English speaking. I didn't want it, but I took it. And, you know, God, in the middle of this in the middle of this, like, valley, at the very bottom of where I was at, still wanted to give me his word, still loved me so much that he's like, here's my word. I'm trying to show you how much I love you, but you're resisting me. But I'm going to keep pushing. I died on a cross for you. I knew that you were going to be in this spot. I knew that this was going to happen to you, and I still spoke to you. Here's my word. And I took it, and I read it. But I'll be honest with you, I was just reading it because I was bored. So anyway, so I was in there. I was in there on my son's birthday. I called my wife, and you know, at the time we were already separated. You know, the Lord took her and my kids and separated them from me because I was causing so much hurt and pain by using rent money and bill money, you know, to buy drugs. Looking back, man, to be honest with you, I'd want to punch that Eric because it was just so stupid. It was just everything that I was doing. But, so I'm on the phone and my son's like, hey Dad, where you at? And I'm like, well bud, I love you. Happy birthday. Phone ends. Click, done. You only get one phone call. And I was so sad after that. So sad because I heard my son's voice. Man, it was so hard to deal with. So I'm still in the same jail. My first court date, and I go to, and I never had been in trouble, you know. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna get out. And the judge says, oh, well, I got a letter from somebody in your family. And he read part of it, and it says that they want you to stay in here. They want you to get help. They don't want you to get out. And basically begged the judge, please don't let him get out. And I knew right away who that letter was from. The judge said, no, you can't get out. I was so mad. Oh, I was fuming. I was so mad. That letter was for my wife, begging and pleading with the judge. Don't let him out, please. Help him. Help him to get help. I want him back as my husband. I want him back as a father of my kids. I want the old Eric to come back. That man that loved me, that man that loved his kids and provided and, led them spiritually. She wanted him back. And that judge said, I'm not letting him out. And I know for a fact it's almost like God was that judge that day and said, I'm not letting you out. I told you I want some time with you. And what the Lord told me too when I first got in jail, He said, no one's going to come visit you. No one's coming up here. He said, it's just me and you. I was in jail for almost a month. It was like 28, 29 days. And not one person ever came up to see me. And I later found out that Pastor Walker, my pastor, he tried to come see me multiple times. And he said it never worked out. He said I wasn't able to get in. They wouldn't let me come see you. And I know that was the Lord, because He had told me that no one's going to come see me. And it really was just me and Him. To be honest with you, I blamed God. He allowed me to break my leg. He allowed it to happen. He could have prevented me from breaking my leg. And that's what led to all this addiction. Why did you allow me to break my leg? Why did you allow that to happen? Why did you do this to me? He didn't do anything to me. I was the one making the choices. It was my decision. I'm the one who said, I'm going to keep taking these pills. I'm going to keep doing this. He had nothing to do with it. But when I did fall, and I felt this, that was the Lord not allowing further injury to me or even dying. So even in the midst of that, His grace and mercy was there. And that was some of the hardest days I've ever had in my entire life. But it was some of the greatest, because it allowed me to have a separation from this addiction that was ruining my life. And the more time I spent in there, the more God was stripping things away from me. But He was also adding to me. And the last week I was in there, He just began to just minister to me, to help me realize I can get out of this. There is deliverance. And He poured out His heart to me. And I just remember sitting in that cell, praying. I fasted 3 days while I was in there, because I wanted more of Him and less of me. I hated who I've become. And sin took me so far. It took me further than I ever thought it would. It turned me into a person that I wasn't. Man, He's a great God. He really is, and He loves me so much. He allowed it to get so far. So anyways, after I got out of jail, I was staying at my mom's house. I had no car, I had no job, I had nothing. But I knew that I couldn't stay there. I knew that if I wanted to get past this, I had to start making changes in my life. So I called this rehab that I already had been to, and I got in within a couple days. And that's when the Lord really started just building me back up, helping me turn into the person that I was before, but a better version as well. And we would have these groups, we'd talk about things, and we'd have these classes. And one of the classes that we had, there's a lady named Rita, and she was a church-going lady, and she would try to incorporate, God. They would call it a higher power at the time. So she went around the room and she said, okay, here, I want you to just kind of talk to us, tell us who you are. And there's about, 15 or 20 of us in this room. And by the third person, she stopped and she looks right at me and she goes, Eric, you know who you are. These people, they don't know who you are. Tell them who you are. And I felt like I was on the spot, but I knew exactly what she was talking about. So I started telling everybody how I used to, get a little speaking here from the pulpit, and I would, teach this Sunday school class, and, how I was this church-going person before. But then I turned into a drug addict. And everybody just looked at me, like, I never knew that about you. I didn't know that. And the whole time I'm in this place, everybody would tell me, you look like you don't belong here. It's like, you look like you're like some undercover cop, or, you actually work for the rehab place and you're just trying to get info on people. And like, here I am again in a place full of drug addicts trying to get help, and they're telling me you don't look like you belong here. The same exact thing that was in the jail, that the people told me in jail. And during that time, I didn't feel like that. I felt, I was a drug addict, just like the rest of these people in here. But the Lord just began to like I said, build me back up, add things to me, and start taking things away from me. And it was a process that it was very hard. And I hadn't seen my kids in a couple months. I haven't talked to my wife, and I was in a place I didn't want to be. But God said, "I'm going to turn you into the man that you need to be." So on Sundays at this rehab place, they would have church, and a minister of whatever kind of denomination would come in. Well, the last Sunday that I was there, the minister didn't show up. And so one of the people in the, one of the people that was in there said, well, why don't we get up here and just kind of share what we feel? And the Lord said, I want you to get up there and I want you to talk about Psalms 35. Psalms 35, Proverbs 35, I think it's Psalms 35. And I said, I'm not getting up there. You say, yeah, you are. You're going to get up there. So person after person got up there, finally got to the end. And the Lord said, you get up there right now. I'm like, God, I'm not getting up there. And then everyone's about to leave. He said, get up there. And I'm like, okay. So I got up there. And it's a warring one, and it talks about how your enemy has laid nets and all these entrapments for you. And I began to talk about how we have an opportunity to get out of this drug rehab place. And everything that was trying to entrap us before will now be reversed and turned around on them. And we had this opportunity, and God just began to talk through me, and people started getting teared up. And when I was done, they came up to me and they said, wow, thank you so much. You have a spiritual side about you, and it's beautiful. Here I am again, feeling different. People looking at me like I'm different. And I could look back and I could see how God was changing me from the jail to the rehab. He had stripped me down of things in the jail. And then I get into the rehab, he starts adding things to me, building me back up, trying to get back to a better version of Eric before. And I miss my wife a lot. In the counsel that I had, I told her, I said, yeah, me and my wife are done. I'm like, she's been through enough, and she doesn't want to get back together. And she's like, well, let's call her. I'm like, I'm not calling her. Well, we ended up calling her. And, the lady's name was Annette. She started talking to my wife and said, would you just come up and we can just talk? And my wife said, oh, I don't really want to. And when I heard my wife's voice on that phone, I got emotional because I missed her so much. And just hearing her voice, it caused so many different emotions of like guilt, shame, happiness, and joy, love, all at once. So she eventually agreed to come up, and we had this meeting, and she was very offish with me. She was very protected of herself, and I understand that because I broke her trust so many times. I lied to her so many times, and I was selling my own stuff to get money, and I would take rent money, I'd take bill money. I did whatever it took to get the love of my life at that point, and it was drugs. I had fallen in love with drugs, opioids, Oxycontin, Percocets, Vicodin, Norco, you name it. That was my love, and I did everything I could to get that. And it's hard to admit this, and I know people that I go to church with, my family, I know other people that are going to see this, and knowing this about me makes me feel like they're going to look at me differently. But the fact of the matter is, I have to put this out here. I've got to put this testimony out here, because there's people out there that are struggling with addiction. You might even be sitting in the pews right now struggling with addiction, and nobody knows. But I can tell you, you can't do it alone. You need the Lord. You need support. You need to be able to say, listen, enough is enough. I have to tell somebody. It might not even be drugs. It might be depression. It might be something else that's holding you back, some hurts and some pains. You can't do it alone. You need the help of the Lord. You need people around you that are going to love you and help you and get you through that. But if they don't know what's going on, how can they help you? How can we blame God for not doing something to help us, but we're not saying anything to try to get help? It's like we're expecting somebody to just know what we're thinking, because it's so hard to admit what you're going through or what you've done wrong. But God is love. He knows what's going on inside of you. But it takes me to come out and say, listen, this is what's going on. I'm struggling. And struggle is hard. It's so hard. It wears you out. You get tired. You feel beaten down. You can't get back up, but I can tell you, you can get back up with Jesus. I promise you. I walked away far. And coming back, it took years. Coming back to church and getting acclimated with everybody. And I had broken a lot of people's trust. A lot of people knew what I did, So, coming back to church for the first time in a while, it was hard because I knew people were going to look at me. And I felt like they were going to judge me. And I was so weighed down with guilt and shame, even though at this point I had changed my life and it already had been, wow, I don't know, months since I had taken any pill, any opioid. You know, the Lord had broke that addiction and delivered me. But it took years for me to start feeling comfortable coming back to church. And it wasn't the people. It was me. And a lot of people opened up their arms to me, showed me love. Pastor and Sister Walker, oh man, they showed me so much love. They would help Danielle and I to get back together, to become a family unit again. And I love you, Pastor and Sister Walker. Thank you for everything you've done for me and for my wife. Because during that time, there was a lot of people that would shelter my wife, that would cover her, and not allow hurts to get to her. And my wife, when the phone would ring sometime, you know, she didn't know if she was going to get a call saying I was dead. Because I should have been dead so many times. How do you take that many pills in a day and not die? I'm so grateful to you, Lord. You know, since then, I've had 2 more kids. I had neck surgery. And I can tell you, to be honest, I had to take opioids. And I did it responsibly. I did it with the help of my wife. I never took extra. And I had not touched an opioid. And it's been years, like 7 years, something like that, 6, 7 years. I'm so grateful. Sorry I'm getting so emotional. It was such a rough time in my life. It was very hard. It is hard right now to kind of look back, and things still kind of pop up here and there with my wife. I want to just say, if you've got a testimony, share it. Get it out there. People need to hear this. There's power. There's power. Revelation 12 and 11 said, they're overcomers by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. God put that in the same verse. The blood of the Lamb. And we know that. There's power in that. We plead it upon ourselves. There's forgiveness. But in the same scripture, it says, by the word of their testimony, they were overcomers. In order to have a testimony, you got to have the blood over you. You got to have the forgiveness. Without the blood, there is no testimony. But there's power in your testimony. And a lot of times, we don't share a testimony because we're afraid. We think people are going to judge us. We're going to be embarrassed by it. But that's a lie. And that comes from the enemy. Get your testimony out there. People need to hear it. There's a pandemic going on right now. People don't know if they're going to get it, if they're going to live, if they're going to die. People need to hear about your testimony. Because they're going through some of the same things that you have, that I have. It's so important right now. We have power. There is a power in this testimony. God said that to us. There's power in it. People need to hear it. And I hope when you hear my testimony that it helps you. I challenge you. Share your testimony. I have a couple other people that, we're basically just going to sit down and talk, and they're going to share their testimony. And it's going to be survivors talk. We're survivors. We survive things. And we're just going to talk about it, record it, and put it out there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me. And all those that have helped me. I love you. I thank you so much. Without you guys, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have a family. I wouldn't have a wife. You know who you are. And you know that I love you. Thank you so much.